Hey guys, Colton here. We'll get back to the podcast in just 1 minute. I just wanted to let you know that my new book, 24 Rules of Masculinity, is officially out. If you've been resonating with the topics we've hit on in this podcast, discipline, purpose, identity, what it means to be a man today, this book was built for you. It's a straight-talking guide packed with hard lessons, biblical principles, and the kind of clarity that I think a lot of us are starving for. So whether you're just starting on your journey or looking to get back on track, I wrote this to be something that you can pick up, apply, and carry with you. You can find the 24 Rules of Masculinity on Amazon and through the link in the description. I would love to hear what you guys think. Now, back to the episode. Welcome back to Chasing Masculinity. In this episode, we're not picking a fight, but we are asking a serious question. Is being controversial the only way left to live authentically as a man? I don't want this to be a rant or any sort of manifesto, but it is an honest look about what happens when simply standing firm in your values, speaking directly, dressing like a man, leading your home, starts to feel like a rebellion. Now, this isn't any sort of conclusion, but rather an exploration to a question that I have been pondering for a while. Our culture, it has shifted. Masculinity didn't just fall out of favor. It got caught in the crossfire. What used to be considered normal is now labeled toxic, outdated, or just downright oppressive. So the question is, do men need to push back harder? Or is there a better way to reclaim truth, strength, and leadership? Now, I don't want this episode to be about reckless provocation, but it is about making an argument worth exploring. So let's talk about boldness, backlash, and whether controversy has become the new cost of conviction. Let's get into it. So, when did masculinity start to become controversial? I'm not sure I have the answer to that necessarily, but it was certainly apparent when I was living in California. So I moved there as an early adult. I finished up my university education there. And I experienced firsthand at a California state school the sheer liberalization of norms, of language, and this whole identity politics. There was this cultural expectation to suppress masculinity for the sake of social harmony. Like it was the toxin that was poisoning the well, and it wasn't even past the point of trying to suppress it necessarily. It was the expectation that it was already suppressed. Like we had already gotten past that point. We're already at this utopic state, so masculinity no longer has a need here. And that was just the general expectation of the entire culture. If you were direct or confident or carried any sort of authority that could be labeled as masculine, you were often labeled as aggressive or just arrogant. There's just a general acceptance or force to tone it down or to be more sensitive. If you did want to fight back, you were going to face serious pushback for leading any sort of healthy discussion or making any sort of bold decision. If you wanted to dress like a man, and I don't have an exact picture of what a man is, but it certainly isn't this hyper-feminized look that's celebrated in a lot of more left cultures, you would get strange looks or criticism. Even if you're like trying to dress sharply or take care of yourself or taking pride in your role as a man, you would be getting more backlash than if you wore women's clothes, let's say, because that is an expression of your identity, whereas embracing masculinity for some reason is not. That traditional masculine posture, both physically and socially, it was like seen as this threat to society. I think this whole cultural shift to where masculinity became controversial was between like 2016 and 2023. Something about 2016 seemed to be the kickoff for masculinity getting absolutely berated and shot down all the way through 2023, where it got really bad. Cultural narratives hit an all-time low point for masculinity. The rise in terms like toxic masculinity became just a complete blanket condemnation for any male strength. Masculine traits like clarity or decisiveness or leadership were reframed as problematic and oppressive, such as knowing how to lead and being decisive and making those decisions was somehow a bad thing. And leading your home was absolutely not allowed. That was controlling. And confidence, that was toxic. And that strength, that was just oppressive. And this wasn't just some sort of online rhetoric, blue-haired Twitter. No. This was real. It bled into workspaces and to schools and to even friend groups where you could have a really close group of guys that you would stereotypically think of, you can do anything together, and you could say some pretty raunchy stuff and nobody's going to care. No, not there. You would still get some pretty substantial backlash, or at least you had to be careful who in the friend group was present. How did I handle it? Probably not the best. I certainly kind of went with the flow for a while. Eventually, as I started exploring what masculinity was, which coincided heavily with my faith and the development of the man that God created me to be, I stopped backing down. But I still had to adapt, if you will. You have to learn to be strategic with your language and your presence, knowing when to do what. I had to choose when and how to speak so I could still stand my ground, but I didn't want to be just completely dismissed outright. But also, I don't want to be viewed as this oppressive patriarchal figure that is toxic. It was this weird tiptoeing around without completely compromising my values. And I began to recognize the emotional temperature of the rooms before I was entering them, knowing, okay, what's the best way to do this? Now, I will say in the past year or so, I've certainly become a lot less tiptoey with my approach and a lot more outright. And thankfully, there's also starting to be some glimmers of pushback. Like the 2024, 2025, finally, we're seeing this sort of stop button. Like enough is enough. This identity politics, this rhetoric of completely bashing men, we're seeing the severe negative side effects of this. And unfortunately, those side effects are kind of the desired outcomes of the people who are pushing this agenda. So it becomes kind of a two-sided battle. But thankfully, there's at least enough ammunition on the other side to fight back. More men are speaking up, and these cultural cracks are forming. Masculinity has finally started to gain traction again. It was quiet at first. There was a lot of public figures that were early that got completely canceled or wiped from the face of the earth. But thankfully, a lot of them are still here or were able to stick it out. And now we're starting to see some more boldness with people speaking up. Think of comedians and podcasts and authors and pastors who are kind of slowly reclaiming that narrative. They're starting to tiptoe less. They're starting to care less about being PC and care more about the actual true message of whatever they're trying to get across. So back to, is it time to be controversial? What does controversial even mean now? To clarify, controversial does not equal extremist. We're not talking about loudmouth provocateurs or clickbait cowboys. We're not talking about the Andrew Tates here. Yes, are they controversial? Absolutely. But that is not the only definition of controversial. Today, being controversial based on how far that narrative has been pushed could simply mean saying men and women are inherently different, or a man should lead his household with conviction, or making jokes that aren't pre-approved by the internet, or dressing like a man with that intention and purpose, being clean cut and having a strong posture without any sort of apology. or just simply praying in public, standing up in a meeting, not apologizing for truth. All of those could be viewed as controversial now. And I'm hoping that that's not the case forever, but at least that seems to be the current social environment. Now, I'm not taking a stance on this. I'm just simply asking the question, is being controversial the only way left to live authentically as a man? Is that the necessity? Is that the necessary tool to push back against this cultural decay? Or is it simply just trying to shock people awake? And is that even the right strategy to be going about this? Now, these are ideas worth wrestling with. Like, is controversy a necessity to reintroduce clarity? But also the long-term health of our society and of masculinity is going to require truth, not just this sort of reaction. So there's that countercultural masculinity versus the cultural authenticity. Today, masculinity is countercultural, but that wasn't always the case. In the 90s, 2000s, they still had room for strength and leadership and discipline. The shift now that culture has made glorifies that fluidity and that softness and that emotionality without any sort of structure. And masculinity then becomes dangerous because it suggests limits and convictions and non-negotiables. Now, I want to clarify my aim with all of this because it may just seem like a ramble up until this point. I'm not trying to, and I don't think I've been edgy for the sake of being edgy at least, but what I do want to do is restore this sense of normalcy where a man can just be a man again. The culture of today says, be whatever you feel. But ironically, men are being authentic, but yet the culture can't handle that version of authenticity. It's very hypocritical. So maybe we should all just start identifying, if we're going to play into identity culture, I'm just going to start identifying as a masculine man, because then will I be accepted again? Probably not. But that sort of satire just points to the pure hypocrisy of the entire system. If culture celebrates identity, why is the male identity the one thing that's still questioned? Why is that evil? Why is that toxic? Pushback isn't the enemy here, but it's not the goal either. Sometimes we need this sort of tension to create the momentum. The goal, obviously, is this peace, or at least order and restoration of healthily orientated masculinity, not this endless controversy of masculinity versus everything else. And to go about this, to wrestle with being controversial, there's a difference between courage and ego, and what are you really after if this is something that's worth pursuing? So courage, that's doing the hard thing in the right moment, even if it's going to cost you. Ego is doing something bold just so people can see you doing it. And a lot of people confuse the two, including myself. They call it truth-telling, but it's really just self-serving. They label it as leadership, but really all they care about is that control or praise that they're going to get. Or they chase influence instead of any sort of responsibility. Now, this isn't to say you don't need an ego. You do, but it has to be reined in. Ego maybe gets you moving, but that restraint is what's going to keep you honorable. It takes courage to have an ego, but it takes that masculine discipline to keep that ego in check. Real leadership isn't about attention. It is about pure service. So, are you being controversial to serve others, to push back, to fight the good fight, to protect truth? Or do you just want the attention, to hop on the bandwagon, or to feel important? The loudest voice is definitely not always the truest. But silence isn't wisdom either. You have to be able to stand firm on the hills that you're willing to die on. Find the line where truth meets discipline and stand there like a man. I've touched on it briefly, but I want to take a side tangent here to talk about that masculine presentation and how we should take time to look like a man again. Start with the basics. Men have just stopped presenting themselves like a man. They've stopped caring about masculine traits, or they've started to feminize themselves purely for looks. I think it's called look maxing, where men, most likely boys, but still sometimes in their late teens, early 20s, where they should be men, they are doing very feminine or bolstering very feminine features of themselves, posting it online for clickbait and for looks and what have you, putting makeup on, doing all that stuff to look more feminine because they think it makes them look better. And too many men are dressing passively like boys. Like they don't care about what they look like, or they're going purely into the feminine direction, but they're not dressing like leaders, not like somebody who should subtly but intentionally demand attention. Fashion, it has blurred lines. There's the tight fits, there's the pastel colors, there's loud patterns. That's not the issue here. I have plenty of bright pink golf shirts. The issue is it's intentionless, or it's this passive presentation. There are some foundational traits of being present as a masculine figure. That could be your posture, standing up straight, shoulders back, head up. This alone changes how people are going to treat you. And then having your eye contact, being respectful but firm, not averting your gaze like you're apologizing for being in the room, but also not having this weird serial killer unbreakable eye contact. Your tone of voice, being able to speak clearly, not mumbling or adding verbal cushions like I think and maybe or to everything. And then going back to the clothing, wearing some sort of structure that looks like you cared about it. Not cared about it, again, like you're some fashionista, but that you actually care what people think about you. So the collar, belts, boots, whatever that looks like. Present yourself as somebody that others can somewhat rely on, not just someone kind of blending into the adolescence. You don't need a suit, but you do need intentionality. Just simple, clean, durable, strong clothing that works for you, not against you, not conforming to what others think a man should be. So dress like someone worth following, not flashy, not insecure, but purposeful, grounded, reliable. And I don't think any of that is necessarily controversial, but it could be. That's the issue, is some people view this as controversial. How dare you say that there's a such thing as masculine and feminine clothing and presentation? That is a controversial statement. And that's the argument I'm trying to make, is it time to just downright be controversial and say, for the clothing, for example, forget this. I'm going to intentionally be masculine. I'm going to go out of my way to have a very masculine look, to have a strong build and a big neck and facial hair, or I don't know, something like that, where you are truly embracing whatever look you feel truly and healthily masculine in, and not conforming to the femininity of today's culture or the celebration of your identity, but instead celebrate masculinity. Masculinity it should be your identity. You are a man. Therefore, you should celebrate masculinity the best way that it serves you. Now, there is some scriptural references to being controversial. Like Jesus, he was controversial. He challenged the authority of the Pharisees. He flipped the tables. He healed on the Sabbath. He told the truth even when it got him killed. And Peter's redemption arc, he ran when Jesus needed him, but he came back and he became the rock on which the church was built. Controversial, yeah, but also faithful. Scripture doesn't call men to passivity. I want to talk about it again, Matthew 19:26, with man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. If I could get that tattooed on my forehead, I would. Well, I guess I can, but I'm not going to. But even in a hostile culture, God is going to equip you to stand. This includes speaking and showing up and being seen and being mocked for celebrating this masculinity. Christian men have always faced resistance. That's the way it's always been. What we're facing today is not new. It shouldn't surprise you. It just might feel louder and it's a lot more digital. Truth, it's never been popular. It's never been comfortable. But don't become addicted to this controversy either. Controversy could be used as a tool. It's not necessarily a calling. You have to be able to stay rooted in the word daily and pray for that clarity, not that applause. And know what your mission is: to lead, provide, protect, disciple, not just stir the pot. And that, I think, could be a way that we reclaim what was taken, to get back to a sense of normalcy where masculinity doesn't feel countercultural. One thing that I think was definitely lost in this big shift against masculinity was humor. Comedians. Not just straight up crude or cruel, but just some honest, sometimes raunchy, usually raunchy masculine humor. Humor that makes light of the things that we're no longer allowed to make fun of. Not necessarily mocking weakness, but just being able to just make a stupid, provocative joke that pushes the boundary, because that's what comedy is supposed to do. It's supposed to put you right on the edge, that's able to push that boundary. And that was almost lost. That was almost taken from us because of this. And humor, it matters. It signals confidence and security and clarity, and it pokes fun at the things it's supposed to be able to poke fun at. If we can't poke fun at things, that means we're living in some sort of dystopian, dictator-ruled universe. If we're not able to point at something and make fun of it, or point at somebody and make fun of them, then we're going back to a monarchy where the king can kick us out because we don't like him. Humor is able to diffuse tension and bring us together. It communicates truth, but it's wrapped in laughter. Or sometimes it's just pure comedy, fictional comedy, but it brings people together. Think of like Dave Chappelle and Shane Gillis. It's this rise we've seen in the past couple years now of comedians who are coming back. We're starting to regain this ground. They are daring to speak plainly. They're controversial, and people love it. Why are they so popular? It's because men are starving for just honest comedy, the way it used to be. Jokes are one of the last places where truth is going to leak out. So that's something that we almost lost. And thankfully, in the past few years, we've been getting it back. And I hope that that's the start of this normalcy. I hope that maybe being controversial isn't the way to get us back to a baseline of masculinity and the cultural expectation of men, but maybe it is. And those comedians like Dave Chappelle and Shane Gillis certainly are controversial, but they helped push that buck back a little bit and allowed others to follow suit. Masculine humor is strength with the punchline. You don't need to be a comedian, but reclaiming the ability to speak freely without apologizing, being able to repeat their jokes, or being able to say similar jokes without getting completely ostracized or cut or fired, that's what we need to get back to. The key is rebuilding a male community, but also reclaiming what was just lost in the shuffle of fighting against masculinity. So to the young man who's afraid to be seen in that way, ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? Rejection, criticism. You're already living in a world that mocks masculinity. You're not going to start losing favor. You never had it. You're not just going to be standing out. You're standing up, and other men will find you when you do. Legacy is not going to be built in whispers or in silence. But I want to go back. Controversy is not the goal. Strength and truth are. Masculinity is. The point of doing these potentially controversial things, speaking up, dressing like a man, leading publicly, isn't necessarily to shock people. It's to just be who God called you to be and to help us get back to healthy masculinity in the culture, in society. So, final encouragement, if controversy is what we need, and I don't know if it is, just don't do it for likes. Don't do it to go viral. Do it so your son knows what a man looks like. Do it so your wife knows she's protected. Do it so other men know they're not alone. So, is it time to be controversial? Maybe, maybe not. That's not really the real question. The real question is, are you willing to be seen, heard, counted? Are you willing to stand up for truth, to speak like a man, to dress with purpose, and to lead in public, even if the world's going to call you controversial nonetheless? You don't need to chase shock value. You don't need to go viral. You need to show up in your masculine identity without apology. Being bold doesn't mean being reckless. It means being rooted. It means telling the truth even if it offends. It means protecting your family even if you're mocked. It means leading with clarity even if you're labeled. Controversy might find you, but that's fine. But let it find you standing, never hiding. This episode isn't a call to outrage. It's more of a challenge. Be the kind of man who lives so fully aligned with truth, presence, and conviction that silence isn't even an option. Because the world doesn't need more men playing it safe. It needs you. Thank you for tuning in to Chasing Masculinity. Until next time, keep chasing.